Hi, I'm John. Some people call me the Rip. I'm going to be doing a series on the Gospel of Matthew, and it's just important that I start off with a little bit of an introduction. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to listen to the introductions, and that they might be boring, but I think if you listen to this bit, and I'll try to be fast, it might answer questions and make it easier when we're actually doing this type of stuff. Basically, what I'm looking to do when I go through the Gospel of Matthew is to look at things the way I've been taught to look at Scripture, but in the process to discover Jesus in a way that maybe I haven't in the past. And in order to do that, I've actually been helped quite a bit by some biblical scholars, N.T. Wright, Ched Myers, Dave Andrews, Apple Gill, and a number of others that have really helped me. And then probably the primary source for this group of studies is Warren Carter and a book called Matthew on the Margins. Now, when I'm looking at things in Matthew, I'm looking at a few really simple concepts. The basic, they call them hermeneutics, so the way that we interpret the Bible. And the fact is we all interpret the Bible. All of us do. We might say that, oh, I just let the Bible say what it has to say, but we all interpret it in one way or the other. And the rules about interpreting the Bible are supposed to be context, context, context. And those contexts are the context of the scripture within its passage, the context of the scripture within the entirety of the Bible, and the context of the scripture within its culture. But I might want to suggest a fourth context that we have to look at. But first, when I'm looking through this study, when I'm looking at the context of the scripture within its basic passage, one of the things I'm going to try to keep in mind is not just what it's saying within the verse and chapter, but what it's saying within its narrative, because the verses and chapters were actually added later. We have to keep that in mind. But that's enough on that. That's pretty self-explanatory. The next context that we have is the context of the entirety of the Bible. Now, this is where we might wind up with a little bit of a difference between some of the normal views that people might have about the context of the scripture and the Bible as a whole. See, most evangelical people would see the Bible as the center and then interpret Jesus in light of what the whole Bible says. But I actually think that's backwards. I think that our faith says that Jesus is the center. It says that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that it says that Jesus is the exact representation of God, that Jesus is the fulfillment of the scriptures, that Jesus is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Jesus should be our center. So what I would propose is that we actually start with the life and the teachings and the death and the resurrection of Jesus as the center through which we can interpret everything else. Now, that doesn't mean that the other bits of Scripture are any less important than the gospel. But what it means is that we look at the life and teachings of Jesus and we interpret the rest of the Bible based upon what Jesus said and did. And so as we go through, we won't, if we take a passage that seems to be maybe a bit contradictory to something that we've read in the Old Testament, we're going to take the way Jesus lived, the things that he taught, and the way that he actually fulfilled that in his death and resurrection. And we will make the rest of the scriptures come in line with Jesus, because Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So we're going to take that as the context of the Bible would center around who Jesus is. The third context is the context of the culture, and I think this is where we've done a pretty poor job. But one of the things that I'm going to emphasize as we go through is the fact that Matthew is not only talking to a first century Palestine Jewish community and in their cultural context, but Matthew is also writing to a specific group of people. He's writing to Christians. He's not trying to tell a history story. He's writing to people to basically give them a picture of Jesus and a picture of what discipleship and following Jesus actually means. He's doing that on purpose. So the author of Matthew, whether you believe it's Matthew or whether you believe it's somebody else afterwards, doesn't really matter. I believe it was Matthew, but the fact is the author of Matthew is teaching about Jesus for a certain group of people. He's helping them to understand, and what that certain group of people are is they're a group of Jewish people that have come to faith in Jesus as the Messiah in the midst of a world where the Romans have occupied the Holy Land and they are being oppressed not only by the Romans but also by the Jewish leaders in their own community. Um, we see that the animosity between the Jews and what they would see, and quite rightly if you think about it, as a burgeoning cult in their midst, that animosity began fairly early in the history of the church. And so we're going to be looking at the scriptures from that point of view. Now, that leads me to the fourth context, and I think this is really important. The fourth context is the culture from which we're reading it. Our own culture is going to affect the way that we see the scriptures. Um, some of the studies in postmodernism have shown that you can't read something without coming from a certain point of view. And my friend Neil Cole, in his amazing book, Church 3.0, tells a story about a scientific study where they have people, they give people a song and they have them tap out the song on the table, and the other people have to guess what that song is. Well, the people that are knocking out the song just can't believe the other people don't know that song. How could you not know when I'm tapping out happy birthday to you? How could you not know that's what I'm tapping out? Well, the reason why they can't know is because they don't have the knowledge of what the song is. And to really try to understand how they're feeling, you have to unlearn what you already know, which is, well, I know that this is the song, so obviously you should understand it in this way. My challenge to you, and this was Neil's challenge to the rest of the people who read his book, was how can we unlearn something that we've already learned? And this is the problem. For the last 1700 years, we've read the scriptures from the place of Christendom, from the place where the Christian community has had the power, both political and economic. So we read it from a structure that is created from that point of view. And all of our interpretations have come from that point of view. And we impose that onto the text. So when we read something, we read it trying to read it from that point of view. So we don't want to challenge our own world. We don't want to challenge our own political structures. We don't want to challenge our own religious structures. And it's a normal response for us to do that, to protect what we already have. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this fourth context, the context from which we read it from, and we're going to try to distrust it just a little bit. We're going to try to say, okay, I don't want to read this trying to defend my own culture, to defend my own denomination, to defend my own way of viewing things. But we're going to try to open things up and say, in Jesus' culture and context, what was he actually saying? And then, how would that apply to us without trying to put our own agenda on it? Now, I would say that that's probably impossible, but that's the goal. And so as we go through the book of Matthew, that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to look at the parables. We're going to look at the teachings. We're going to look at the way Jesus lives his life, the things he does, and the way that Matthew reveals Jesus. And from that, we're going to see how we should live, how we should act, how we should love, and hopefully how to be disciples of Jesus or followers of Jesus. So that's the basic introduction. Hope it didn't bore you too much, but we're going to go from here and we're going to jump right into the genealogies, which is the very beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, in the next video. Thank you.